online, it's interesting because there's so many different perspectives going on, and you really have to pay attention to where a person's coming from and what their outcomes are when you're first reading information and then when you're taking it in. So what's the person trying to get you to do? What are they trying to influence there? And what are you looking for? Does that make sense? Can I just get some check-ins on where you guys are at starting off?
That makes sense, and that checks with what I remember when we've done this type of thing with you before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I agree.
Keep going.
Valerie, for you?
I feel like being able to read information with online dating and understand decisions and motivations is the eighth mystery of the world. So, all yours.
And Jude, for you?
You know, I didn't get the email, so.
There wasn't a whole lot on it. I mean, essentially, and I'll have Barb and Steven and Valerie, I want you guys kind of get a perspective of what we've done before, because we've analyzed text conversations, emails, those kind of things using the NLP framework. But essentially how this goes is NLP gives us the opportunity to look at any kind of communication objectively. So this is the communication, this is the outcome from the person, what they want you to do. This is your outcome, what you want to achieve. Are you getting closer, or are you getting further away from that outcome by the information provided? Then we can take a step further and we can look at every single communication that's within some kind of communication. So maybe that's a text communication. We can look at exactly what's being said, all the implications that could be there within that text. We can look and see the context, where that would fit, where that wouldn't fit, and what messages we can receive in that communication. Using NLP, it makes it really objective. And so I invite all kinds of challenges, anything that anybody has come up here. It's really a chance for us to challenge what's going on and what we're kind of being told. And so, yeah, Barb and Steven, if you want to go further in that, kind of what we've done in the previous classes in this kind of topic.
Barb's not feeling too well tonight. She may leave us early.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to?
Well, I'm just thinking about the one client of yours, Sean, in which she was texting you and she wasn't understanding how her actions were actually possibly pushing the other person away. And it took her quite a few texts between the two of you for her to understand, A, what she was even wanting, and then B, how her communication wasn't clear to this guy that she was interested in. And because her communication wasn't clear, it actually was pushing him away instead of drawing him in.
And another thing that I remember from that particular text exchange when we ran through it and discussed it was that she didn't realize she was, she had a particular script, and it was essentially a game playing kind of thing, and she didn't realize what she was doing and playing that particular game.
Yeah.
And as to how to use NLP, I remember asking you, Sean, a lot of questions about, exactly what you said in that email about what we're going to talk about tonight, which is, how do you know what to pay attention to? How do you know, or how do you figure out how you're going to proceed as the counselor?
Yeah, that's a good one. And Valerie, for you on the ones that we've had on these?
I think a lot of what's already been said about understanding the action reaction, so the sort of dynamic, and then also really looking for clues to the other person's map of the world, basically. So based off of how they take in very little information, like what's exchanged in a text message exchange, which is usually not a lot of context, you lose tone, you lose meaning, and seeing how the reaction is like a little clue to their map. And then really, I don't think this is hearts integration, but switching positions to try and better understand the dynamic has been very helpful as we've analyzed the exchanges.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'd add to this is just, really challenge everything. So in this class, there's nothing really we're going to take personally or have our hearts attached to. And so in the whole thing of relationships, that's what often happens is
I'm going to challenge that, Sean.
Okay. What you got?
So, and I'm at least halfway serious about this, but I remember, so if this is about learning and applying to ourselves and changing, I remember an exercise we did with you where the idea was to take somebody and have them imagine their painful memory, whatever it was exactly, and you made it more intense. You told them to make it as intense and as personal as possible because then it was easier to change. So maybe we do want to take it a little personally.
Oh, okay.
I know your point, and it was slightly different than that, but
let me add to that and ask you, what would taking it personally do for somebody that would be positive for them?
Well,
in that context,
I'm not. Well, first of all, if you're taking it personally, you've got to do that with the right attitude.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably key and possibly the only key. But if you do that with the right attitude, then you may be able to understand it more deeply and make a change if necessary, faster or more effectively or something like that.
Okay.
Well, if you're taking it personally, it's probably triggering something. So it's probably something that you need to take a look at and go within and figure out what it is. If it doesn't trigger something, two people can have a conversation about something and talk, and completely disagree on something and not be triggered by it and not take it personally if it's not something that they're needing to work on.
What's the problem with having something be taken personally?
What is the problem with taking something personally?
Yeah, we're talking. I don't know
that you can. I don't know that I could frame it as a problem. I think that it's an indication of something. That if somebody takes something personally, that it's triggering something. That it's something that they might need to look at, or at least have a better or more effective communication with that person to try to understand what they were saying, because maybe what they were saying isn't necessarily what they were saying. And that happens all the time in any kind of relationship, is that somebody says something and they do a mind read on it and they just, take it the wrong way and then may take it personally.
Well, it was presupposed behind your communication, so that's why I asked. Essentially, what you had stated just now was that if you take it personally, then you have problems in your communication. And I want to know specifically how. Stephen, I see you thinking over there.
I've got to think more quietly. So the potential problem with taking something personally is how exactly you do it, which gets back to if you do it with the right attitude. So say, for example, a husband and a wife are arguing, and one of them says something that kind of triggers the other, and their button is pushed and they get upset and the conversation starts escalating in a not good way. I dare say that probably implies that they've not had the right attitude about that. Now, let's say even the person who made the negative comment did have a negative intent towards it. They're just angry and they're just lashing out or something. If the other person can remember, and just for this particular example, that's their spouse, right? and that in the end they still love each other, etc. So if you can have the right attitude, which is that maybe that person said it for the in the wrong way, maybe even for the wrong reason, but there's likely some truth there that needs to be dealt with. So if the person responding can use the right attitude, step back, not get emotional, and try to get at what that is, you know, in the right attitude, you could potentially turn a what might even be a habitual bad situation into a situation.
So
but
Steve,
it's something
Steve,
more
what's
like,
that look? What's that sound like if somebody says something negatively, like to you, and it triggers something?
It just really pisses me off when you don't clean up the dishes or you leave your clothes lying on the floor or something like that. And it sounds like an honest gripe, but said in a way not appropriate to a spousal relationship.
I understood the negative. I was asking what the reaction would.
I'm sorry.
Be the reaction.
Okay. So, you know, a possible negative response would be to possibly raise your voice back and say, well, you do this and you don't do that. And you always piss me off when you yell at me for leaving my clothes lying on the floor, whatever it is. So that'd be a negative. The positive could be, like I said, right attitude. This is my spouse that loves me. So I'm going to recognize my state that's getting agitated, and I'm going to step back. I'm going to calm down, and I'm going to say, maybe they have a legitimate gripe. And so then I would say something more like, I know you've told me that a bunch of times, and I haven't really changed. I'm sorry. I know we like to keep the house clean, and this just doesn't contribute, or something like that, right?
We're going to go into some very specific examples of exactly this.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Last final note is that, anything challenged or anything looked at, we will be going in and seeing the proofs of it, whether that's real world experience, or whether that's implied knowledge, like the implication of this means what. But we'll be looking at actual proofs and the objectiveness as much as possible. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start it, and we'll get screen sharing going because I want to pull up this article for us. Okay, and so this was one that actually everybody can see this all right? I'll blow it up so it's a little bigger even. This was one that my Facebook friends actually shared, and it was interesting in preparing for this. I actually put out a call in one of my groups of finding an article to go ahead and analyze on the women's side. And I surprisingly didn't get much. I was like, wow, that's kind of incredible. Anyhow, this is the article that she had posted on her Facebook. So it was incredible women often have the worst dating lives, and here's why. So there's a lot of things to be said for looking at online and the content that's provided today. Right away, what my first question is what do you think this woman's outcome is that's writing this? And anybody could take that.
It's just to get attention.
Jessica Leitris, yeah.
It's a hook.
Yeah.
What does she want?
People to read the article.
Yeah.
Probably a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
We could go even further with that, and we could look at the website and say, what does the website want by having this woman write the article for them?
What does this website do?
I believe it's just a content provider, honestly. I mean, we could look at it further, but do you really think they give a shit about how good your relationships are going or not?
No.
But this is the kind of thing that is really popular out there, and so it's important that we know what information is being dealt out there. So incredible women often have the worst dating lives. So likely the case is that you'll see this on Facebook or somewhere around on the internet, and you'll go ahead and click on it. What do you think the reader wants to get out of this? What is their outcome?
That they're going to understand why they have the worst dating life. It's already presupposed that that's what their dating lives are. It's terrible, and this is here's why. So it's going to just reinforce and help them feel better about themselves.
Pretty much, right? And so if I'm the author, I probably want to make this girl feel good about herself too.
Yeah.
By one, calling her incredible, and then also relating with her current reality, her pacing of she's having the worst dating life. I want to know why.
I was kind of assuming that the author was the person that the author was writing about. In other words, she was telling her own story.
Oh, okay.
That's a picture of her.
Well, I'd hope she thinks she's an incredible woman too, but maybe not, right?
Well, see, my mind zoomed very quickly, if that's the case, that she's telling her own story, to probably the wrong attitude about what the intention of the article was. So, Of course, you're right, Jude, that she probably thinks she's incredible, and whether I would agree with it or not, but, one possible way to interpret that without looking into it further is that she knows she's incredible. Maybe that means she's just arrogant and high maintenance and, those types of things. And so she's trying to explain why good guys ought to put up with her.
Fair enough.
Or maybe she's incredible to somebody, but she's just not incredible to me. Who knows, right?
She's just not incredible to most people, and that's why she has a horrible dating life.
That could be too. But she's incredible to somebody.
Herself
at least. Yeah.
So let's get it going. Right here it says there are two types of women: those who have amazing luck in love and those who end up in a romantic disaster after another.
This is a victim thing because it's luck and disaster. Those are two things that can't be controlled.
I agree with you, John.
Basically,
that's a good observation, John.
I have no way to win at relationships, right? Either I'm lucky or that's it.
I'm screwed, yeah.
But it's not my fault.
Right.
Well, and you'd have to, I mean, so basically she's just describing somebody that's either got married and has a great, or has had a great relationship, got married and lived happily ever after, and then everybody else, right? So she's trying to appeal to as broad a base as possible. But if you want to reframe this, that's absolutely not. I mean, that's just not the categories. Those aren't the only two categories out there. I wouldn't agree with that context.
So if I'm challenging this and using the meta model, maybe I'm in conversation with her. There's only two types of women. Oh, really? Which types? Okay. How do you know that? How specifically? And how do you know? Does she have verifiable fact that there's two types of women? No, but it is kind of presumed here, and especially with the audience, the readership that's going to read this. What they're wondering is why their dating lives suck, and maybe why their friend just got married and found the most excellent guy. Okay, so there's an explanation of it now. It's actually possible, but not possible for me, or I'm just not lucky. Cool, and so it goes on. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
keep going.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that after that first sentence, I would click away from this because it's not giving me anything. I'm just not agree. I'm not going to agree with the context immediately. So, she's catering to a very small, a very narrow victim mentality type individual. That's not going to really benefit anything from this.
Yeah, I would observe, Jude, that this is probably written for an intellectual level far below yours.
Okay, well, I appreciate the compliment, Steve.
Okay,
It's interesting because actually the woman who posted it, she's brilliant, really smart girl, but she is
I'll
hopeless.
see you later, Sean.
Oh, John.
Bye, John.
See you, John. Glad you made it for a little while.
Have fun working.
Guys.
But she's actually a really intelligent woman, so it's interesting that she does post this, but she is a romantic, emotional type, and so that kind of just boils
She
all
may
these.
just know the audience she's writing for.
Right.
No, the one that posted it on Facebook that actually found value in this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'll give you a spoiler here. We're not going to go through this whole article because it's a whole bunch of things like there are two types of women, and then they say it's not that there's anything wrong with the latter group either. They're smart, independent, and actually really sexy. Okay, well, how do you know? Did you go and interview these women? They're really sexy to who? Okay, according to whom?
Mm-hmm.
So then we're using our meta model programs, and we're really asking the questions. They're actually really sexy to whom? Okay, and you know this how? Turns out that it might be those amazing qualities that are keeping them from finding love. What gives? Okay, so I mean that what gives is just to attract readership and to keep them interested.
Mm-hmm.
And these amazing qualities are actually keeping them from finding love. Okay, really? Do you know in just your own experience, or have you interviewed 1,000 women and you know that these exact qualities are keeping them from love?
Well, and who defines those as amazing qualities?
Exactly. I might hate those qualities.
Right.
So it goes into
She does. I mean, she thinks they are, but maybe the fact that men don't think they are is part of the problem.
And these qualities, they're intimidating. Let's see, they're independent as fuck, and they won't sacrifice for anyone. You know the language,
right. Well, there's two that aren't amazing to me. So
right?
Yeah, Sean, I was going
two.
to ask. I'm sorry, I was going to ask that question earlier. What does the AF stand for?
That's basically 20, 25-year-old lingo of as fuck.
And you're going to have to define that further for me, because that means
So girls these days, if they're texting, and they'll say AF. So I'm tired AF.
oh, that kind of, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, and so that's essentially
Okay.
what that means. But I mean, there's
So sorry for those of you who are already hip.
Valerie, did you have that one already?
Don't worry, I had to look it up too at some point. Not too long ago either.
I didn't know that.
I hope you're not texting guys that.
I'm not sure why as fuck would be the barometer. That's kind of interesting, but we don't have to challenge that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really quick, I don't have too much left for this article. As you've seen, there's a lot of judgmental language and really her implications and her trying to impose her model on her reader's world that she's not credible to do. She doesn't have any experience in this, and she doesn't say anything that's actually really tangible or provable. And so, I mean, really quick, they have a built-in jerk repellent. They call guys out on their BS. They're a little bit weird. Yeah, I mean, what's going on here is she's pacing this woman who's reading their experience really well, saying that you're single because you're intimidating, because you're independent, and you're not going to sacrifice that for anyone. You're a strong, independent woman. You have a built-in jerk repellent. You call guys out on their BS. This is all good, hoorah, girl stuff, like, okay, you're a little bit weird too. I've met these girls. They relate with this weirdness too. They're super picky, know their worth, they're intense. And so really what this is like a rah-rah cry, hoorah, like, let's go women, you're a victim, but it's okay because you're awesome kind of blog post.
So
Yeah,
is this a blog post, Sean, or is this like a little like a website article or one of those life hacker kind of articles that clickbait are like clickbait on Facebook?
Yeah, this is pretty much just one of the incubators that, they have a bunch of relationship advice, a bunch of different articles. Sometimes you can guest post on these websites. And part of the reason I bring this up is because what's on the internet isn't always what works. And what's on the internet isn't always what's useful. And so my last guest post was my last one since a year. I've stopped doing it. Really what got approved wasn't of the quality that I would like to see out there. It was just basic, like really garbage stuff, like 3 things how to do something or something like that. Something really quick, something really stupid that the website published on the Good Men Project. And I really don't have time for this kind of this garbage that they're throwing out there. So that's
right. So I was going to say, if we're looking at it in that context, then it makes perfect sense. They're not looking to dive deep in anything. They're not really looking to help, really help anybody with their relationship. They're just looking to get a click and get onto the website, and then hopefully whatever, maybe somebody clicks on that shop icon up there or whatever else. So, if that's the context that they're presenting it to us, then we kind of know when we're looking at it, if it shows up in Facebook or wherever else, that it's not going to be anything that's, that's deep or anything that we're going to be wanting to look at or analyze. So I think a lot of this we have to look into context at where we find it and what their goal is.
Yeah, I don't really understand. I think you may have said it already, what the actual purpose of this is, and it's just to get readership and so ads and stuff. But if I was a single AF woman who read this and took it seriously, I would come away realizing that it's not me, it's the rest of the world.
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, and then they're going to stay single as that AF, right?
Exactly. Valerie?
Female, intelligent, single AF woman.
I think that's gonna be the saying the rest of the night. AF.
I want to challenge something. Women are not the only ones that perpetuate this type of reasoning for singlehood or spinsterhood or what have you. And I don't know if that's a chicken and egg thing or what, but I feel like we're throwing this female author under the bus and saying that she didn't do her research, she didn't interview all these women, and she probably didn't. But I've heard reasons like this from men as to why
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Totally true.
Yeah.
as far as, postmodern societal wisdom, this is not something that women, journal to themselves at night so they can sleep well. I mean, this gets reinforced by a lot of societal norms and from men in the midst of rejection.
Okay.
I would potentially.
I would even take that a step further, Valerie, and say that men are are the reason behind these reasons why she's having a bad relationship, and that the onus falls upon men.
Hold on. Men are the reason why women are having these problems in their relationship?
Many of them, yeah.
Okay.
Because of the male-female, masculine, and
hold on. According
I was
to
just
what?
going to get to it.
No.
Masculine and female dynamics.
No, that's not
the
what
masculine and female dynamics. We can take them step by step if we want to look at it. If they're intimidating, if a woman is intimidating to the man, it's because he's not fully in his masculine and not understanding how to relate with her.
And
so,
how exactly do you know that?
How do I know if a man is not in his masculine and then she's intimidating to him? I mean,
And
there's all kinds of examples of how she's intimidating to him. If she's intimidating to him, then he's acting in a way where he's shy or he's away.
Specific. We need specific examples. We can't just have a blanket statement.
When a man is feeling intimidated by a woman?
Specifically, when is a man?
Specific time.
Yeah.
So let's say, for an example, when a man is talking to a woman in a bar. Let's say they talk.
Which bar?
When?
I need specifics. We're not going for these blanket statements that a masculine is not in his energy and those things. We need to know specifically, not diagnoses of the society. And so those are what we're after.
You want specific examples of,
so specifically, I would say,
men.
Specifically, I would say I worked with 5 men and I could tell that they weren't in their masculine essence. And so what changed is they got their masculine power and then they communicated effectively. Those are the kind of specifics that we're looking for, not there's a gazillion men are doing this is general.
Yeah, I can give you a specific example of a buddy of mine when we're out at a bar and he goes and he approaches a woman and she's very aggressive in her demeanor and talking to him, and then she's very affluent, she's very well spoken. She is asking him lots of questions, and he starts to get worried and concerned that he doesn't, that he's not good enough for her. And then he starts having all of this, stuff going through his mind. He gets intimidated because he's not fully in his masculine, feeling good about himself and about who he is and about what he's able to present and bring to a relationship. I mean, we can dive as deep as we want into this, Sean. I mean,
I don't want to go deep. I want to go into specifics. And so you mind reading and saying that he has all these things going on in his mind is not what we're looking for specifically.
No, I know specifically my buddy
down,
and what they are
slower,
specifically are.
Slower specifics. So specifically, my buddy did this. And this is what happened. It's not my buddy did this, and I think he wasn't in his masculine energy. It could be the case. I don't know. But I know specifically he did this action, and he didn't like what a woman was giving, and it didn't lead to him having his outcome of the woman liking him, giving her his number or however it was.
Yeah. Specifically, he's talking to her, and I know that and so I know this stuff because I know him well and because we've had conversations. So I know he's not feeling comfortable with how he's looking physically because he's a little bit overweight, because he's not working out like he should. I know that he is feeling a little bit insecure about his job and where he's at. He's self-employed. He's not having a great year, so he's not feeling really good. So when the woman that he's talking to starts talking around maybe I think it was a little bit of physical activity or hiking or something like that, you can see him start to get a little bit intimidated. When she starts talking around work or jobs or traveling, I think it was traveling or something like that, you can start to see him get...
Cool. There's a lot of content there. We're moving away from content. So it's a difference between structure and content. Structure is the actual absolutely undefinable what's underneath it. And so maybe there is all this stuff going on underneath. That's okay. What we're looking at is, I had this one time where this one friend had this situation where, in my opinion, it wasn't him in his masculine essence. That's fine. That's great. We can attribute that to men not being in their masculine essence, and it gives us some kind of proof to it. What I'd even ask more is probably Valerie, who has more experience with this type of thing. Would you say, in your experience in dating other men, that you've noticed that men are less in kind of a masculine frame of mind and frame of reference?
Can't hear you, Valerie.
Can't hear you, Valerie.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry. In my head, I'm trying to sort between content and structure, but so course correct me, Sean, if I get off. But I can think of examples where I was on a date with a man that I perceived to be very confident, very masculine, dominant, everything that I like. And it was surprising how quickly they could kind of abdicate that position and kind of move away from embodying like those qualities. I don't know if this is what we're looking for, but I remember I was on a picnic once. It was like a second or third date, maybe a third date. That seems to be the departure point for me. And that's the magic number. We're on a picnic, and we were talking about life, and we were talking about seeing each other again, and it just, he wanted to see me like the very next day, which my life is a little too full for somebody that I'm just starting to get to know. And I think he was disappointed, and he looked at me and he said, "It's like you don't even need a man."
Okay, that's some good proof for us.
Is that when the red warning lights went off?
that was probably the last time the warning lights went off, because the precursor, this was towards the end of our date, but a lot of that date had been a lot about him explaining to me how, and this was very like premature. I was not encouraging this conversation. I was just interested, so I was letting him talk. Just another strategy of mine, but like a lot of the date was talking about negotiating terms of a relationship, even though we weren't in one yet. And it's something I've noticed in my dating life is what I would call taking a lot of shortcuts, wanting to take shortcuts. So instead of getting to know me, wanting to kind of negotiate at the start. And so what was interesting is when he was trying to frame up his negotiations, it was a lot about how he would be very uncomfortable driving our relationship forward. So even though we were not physically intimate, he was telling me that he did not like initiating sex. I go, that sounds fun.
Oh, gosh.
You know, and things that were like in those veins, and how he would be uncomfortable doing things. And so there was this incongruency between his persona, which, I mean, this man was like an iron worker, very masculine, not an office worker, like many parts of his life were like this, you know, kind of embodying this. And so this was the rejected, but then it was this incongruency as he was telling me all the things that he would not be willing to do, and just how excited he would be if I did those things for him or instead of him initiating them, which I don't doubt those would be exciting on occasion, but you know, it's like not the type of thing that I want to sign up for. It was really interesting to me. It was very interesting.
Gotcha.
So kind of like abdicating the throne, you know. And that was very incongruent with how he projected himself, culminating with it's like you don't need a man. And I'm like, that's right, I don't need a man. At which point I get the whole, they're independent AF and won't sacrifice that for anyone.
So Valerie, that's a good opportunity for me to mention something from your comment earlier.
Like, a single cousin or something you want to introduce me to? I'm just teasing.
Yeah, not that part of that comment, but I'll keep that in mind. So, you know, you said that you've heard that kind of attitude, getting back to the article, from guys. I'd go so far as, well, I agree with you completely, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not making a statement, just more like a question, but I wouldn't be surprised if the women are learning that from the guys.
Yeah.
I think that was my point in bringing it up, is that this, for all we know, she could have based this article off of the last time that she got ripped a new one, you know, by some man that was fresh from the sting of rejection. I mean, who knows, really?
Yeah. Last thoughts on this one before I wrap up this, because we have enough of this article. But to Jude's point, I do agree that essentially that this is perpetuated with men not being masculine, with them, you know, seeing a girl and she's like, oh, I'm intimidated, or, oh, I can't initiate sex. I can't do that. I'm not in my masculine essence. I see more of that on and on and on. And I have experience after experience of meeting a woman who says that men are doing this and it turns them off. I'm seeing over and over again men and men that I'd say are exactly like Valerie says. So
sort of stepping away from this article, but dealing with some of these things on more of the NLP structural level, I would want to know, just like you were asking a little while ago, Sean, I would want to know, for example, what's your definition of masculinity? What's your definition of femininity?
Yeah. Mine? Go.
That's a rhetorical question at this point, unless you want to pursue that. But in terms of understanding communication and trying to really grok it before you figure out what's really going on and then try to deal with it as an NLP practitioner. You know, other questions that I would want to ask in your particular, and this is just, again, rhetorical, Valerie, but in that particular scenario, I wouldn't be surprised if you, I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you presented that you correctly diagnosed him. But one of the thoughts that would go through my mind is, with all the stuff that's going on out there these days in regards to male-female relationships and being intimate, I can imagine a lot of guys being scared of what might happen if they're forward, just being what they think is masculine, and let's just give them, you know.
I had no problem being forward.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on. My point was only that I would wonder why he would be so sort of, because you said dominant and forward, and then he backed off really quickly and said all the things that weren't congruent with that. So I don't know what's going on, but I would probably want to ask more questions to try to figure that out. Is there a fear there?
Well,
is there a bad experience, you know, in general with societal concerns, or is there a bad experience there? Or
I cannot speak for this man because I did not pursue getting to know him any more than that. However, I will say that I think, and I'm going to speak in generalizations, I do feel like there has got to be some content out there about how to engender feelings of safety between when you are getting to know somebody, especially safety for the woman. And the reason I say that is because I've had several experiences where I have noticed either in word anchoring or body language or a combination. I even had one man directly tell me the trick that he was trying to use on me, that it's for the purpose of helping me feel safe. For example, I've been on 2 dates with 2 different men that were very, very tall, taller than I, and I'm not a short woman. And we're sitting next to each other in a booth, and he purposely makes himself shorter than I. And I know what he's doing. I don't mind it, but I understand what he's doing. I had another date where we were walking or I don't know, we were outside and he did the same thing. And then he proceeded to tell me, which I think kind of ruins the trick a little bit, but he's like, look, I'm putting you in control. I'm helping you feel safe. And I'm like subtle, aren't we? You know, subtle and suave, but,
so is that what that trick is? Lowering yourself to put you in does that make you feel safer?
it works. It does work to a point because I'm not looking up. It has to do with how we make eye contact. I'm no longer looking up, which is a position of vulnerability, no matter who you're talking to or working with or whatever. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is. But yeah, there are some physical kind of tricks to engender feelings of safety. Like going out, I went out with a guy that was very Southern, and I don't think there was ever a time where he didn't have a hand on my back, you know, and that's another like protective gesture. So anyway,
I'll give you another one. If I want to go speak to a woman in a vehicle and her vehicle stopped, she doesn't necessarily see me. If I tap on the window and I'm right there in the window, she's going to freak out. She'll be like, right? So what I can do is I can tap on the window, I could step back, and she sees me stepping back, and then it has that sense of safety for her.
They're taught that.
So,
people in
I don't
general
know
taught that if they come knocking on your door trying to sell something, they'll knock and they'll step back 2 or 3 steps.
Yeah.
I don't know if this guy on this picnic, this iron worker, I don't know if he really took it too far with the whole, look at how much control you'll have if you decide to date me.
I think that's
it. Wasn't just about sex, you know, it was about other things too. And so, I don't know, maybe it was that to the extreme. I think it had some other elements to it, but
I do too. I think we'll get more into that as we go along too. Let's look at the next one I have for you guys. Okay. This one was from a pretty renowned dating instructor. He had a pretty popular book out there. I don't have his information up here just in case you guys know him. I don't mind sharing with you who it is and everything. But this was from an email list, so it's a little bit more trustworthy. My belief is he actually does want to help people here. But we'll go ahead and read through this whole one first, and then we'll go through it step by step. So here's another installment in my series of posts from the All the Way In Instructor Q&A forum. Today I'm going to share a recent post about bringing up difficult subjects. Here's what the class member posted. Are there any good rules for bringing up difficult issues? I tried to bring up a difficult issue, but my wife was furious at me, saying I had no right to blindside her and that she never wants to hear it. It finished with her claiming I have no right to approach her, that I was just self-serving and I am selfish all day, all the time. I said I would be bringing it up again, which just brought more of the same. Do you have any suggestions for rules for dealing with issues like this? I'm looking for tools to help me set the tone in a loving way while being aware of my nice guy tendencies. So here's what our dating instructor wrote here. Here's what I wrote in response. It sounds like you are looking for rules to help you relieve your anxiety and to help make sure your wife responds positively when you bring up issues she doesn't want to talk about. Sorry, I don't have any rules for that. Here's what I suggest. When something is on your mind, maybe first talk with a buddy or a therapist. If it is just your stuff, deal with it. If it seems like something that needs to be discussed with your wife, then do it without rehearsing or trying to do it in a way that will get a positive response from her. If something has been spinning in your head for some time, there is probably no way it is going to come out with sounding accusing or having a lot of energy built up behind it. When you do bring up difficult issues with your wife, try the 2-sentence rule. Number 1, when you fill in the blank, comma, I feel fill in the blank. When you criticize me, I feel demeaned, hurt, unloved, etc. Number 2, I would like you to do it this way. Instead of being critical, I would like you to just ask me for what you want, as if I was your best friend. A couple of other tools I suggest is that you take ownership of the problem. This is usually a good idea because you probably wouldn't be bringing it up if you didn't have a problem with it. For example, you might begin with saying, I have a problem. Can you help me come up with ideas to resolve it? There is no blame here, and you haven't put your partner on the defensive. You might say something like, I get really anxious when you raise your voice with the kids. I know it is my stuff, but do you have any ideas how we can work together to lower the volume in our home? Or, I love having a sexual connection with you. I know you've been stressed lately with work, but I'm wondering how we can keep our sexual connection intact without you feeling overwhelmed. Another ownership approach is to start out by stating, I owe you an apology. This always gets a woman's attention. Then take ownership in a sincere way, not a nice guy, passively aggressive, pleasing way. For your lack of leadership or avoidance or passive aggressive way of letting the problem build in the relationship. You can fill in the blank. So for example, you might say, I owe you an apology. I haven't been setting the tone and taking the lead when it comes to our sexual relationship. I've been passive and indirect. I've acted in ways that feel burdensome to you. My commitment to you is to be more conscious of full responsibility for my needs and approaching you in a way that feels loving, not needy. In all instances, keep it simple. There is no guarantee that any of these approaches will elicit a positive response from your partner. It could be that she has a lot of toxic shame, needs to be in control, or needs to always claim the moral high ground of projecting that she never does anything wrong. If your girlfriend or wife reacts negatively or goes on the attack, just repeat your core message once and then let it go for the time being. Don't follow her down the rabbit hole. Remember, just because your wife responds negatively doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And just because your wife initially seems unreceptive, it doesn't mean she didn't hear it or understand it. She might be willing to talk about it at another time. I've always said a woman's reaction to anything that a man does doesn't determine the rightness or the wrongness of the thing the man did. No matter how you bring things up, you might get a negative response. This was true for me in my first and second marriages. My first wife would punish me for bringing up subjects she didn't want to talk about by going silent for days at a time. I soon learned which subjects were off limits. My second wife would go ballistic and verbally and physically attack me if I brought up taboo subjects. There is no magic formula for working out problems with these kind of women. My solution is to get the hell away from them. If your partner is open to working on problem issues, but the two of you just don't have the right tools in your toolboxes, to communicate without feeling blamed, attacked, or unheard, take the lead and suggest the two of you work with a counselor who can help you hear each other and work through the log jams in your relationship. What are your guys' initial thoughts on this?
Well, at the end of last week, I had a male coworker start with, "I owe you an apology." And it's true, it really did get my attention. He was asking me if I had time to talk to him, and I didn't until he told me that. And we're not dating. I mean, it's not a romantic relationship at all. It's a working relationship, but
Yeah.
I'll say that resonated with me, that part of the...
We'll get deeper into that. We'll dive into specifics. Just generally, you think this is good advice for this guy's problem?
What did you say, Jude?
I said, I think it's good advice. It brings up, it allows him to do something that oftentimes, and I know this has been the case with me, it was the case with me for a very long time, is to bring up feelings that I would have otherwise just buried and just tried to get along and not communicated. So it gives, his two steps are kind of like pared down or generic nonviolent communication steps, and how to bring something up with his wife, which I think the nonviolent communication is a fantastic tool on both sides with men and women to bring up things that come up and issues that come up within yourself to try to work through them with somebody. So, and then I think in the beginning he says, he talks about, he basically calls the guy out on anxiety. And if you're anxious, if he's calling him out on being anxious about his feelings, and if he's anxious, he's not in his, his right ability to, and I'd call masculine energy, to talk to his wife about what he's feeling and where he needs to go. And there's going to be nothing, he says, there's going to be nothing that you can do. It's just going to get rid of that anxiety. You're going to have to figure it out, and you're going to have to work through that, which I thought was excellent advice for this, for this guy to really, you gotta approach it. You gotta deal with it. It's there. It's coming up for an issue. It's coming up for a reason.
Let's look at the outcomes here. And so, first start with the author. What's his outcome here?
I think his outcomes probably to get people to sign up for more of his advice, and all the way in structured Q&A form would be my guess. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a sales, giving some free content in order to get a sale or get somebody to sign up.
I might even say it's actually to help this guy. I really believe that.
Yeah.
A reasonable outcome would be, actually, I want to help this guy, and the communication, everything that I see here, it leads to that assumption by me. Of course, it's not.
I think his advice, I think the context of the whole email is to get people to,
I agree, yeah.
I don't know that he's what I'm saying is,
I understand.
Context of the email is to get us to sign up. He's probably not giving like all of what he would give in a therapy session in this Q&A, but he's giving some value and some content.
Now, what do you think the outcome is for the man who asked this question?
I think he genuinely wants to find a way to have the conversation with a positive response. Why I think this advice giver was so careful at the end to explain that the response is not guaranteed. He doesn't get to control that.
Yeah.
I'd get even more specific. What is his specific outcome? He wants this answer to this question. If there's just one question that he could have answered in his whole long thing, what would it be?
How does he bring up difficult issues?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His very first question.
How to frame the conversation.
Where I first start is, well, for what purpose would you bring up difficult issues? And so that's using my NLP language. It's chunking up. He feels a need to bring up difficult issues. Okay, so what's the purpose? What is he going to get by bringing up difficult issues?
You can cross them off the list.
Cross off issues off the list?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can get him. He can keep them from, embedding in his subconscious and manifesting themselves somewhere else in the relationship or in his life.
Now, that presupposes that these issues are going to manifest in his life. Do we know that to be true?
Do I know that unresolved issues between you and your spouse are going to manifest somewhere else? Yes,
How do you know?
because I've experienced it, and I've watched others experience it also, and I've coached others who have had to work through the issues, and until they haven't, then they come up somewhere else. So you can chunk down from what another issue is.
Have you ever
based on
had the
what the issue
situation
is.
where an unresolved issue didn't come up and affect somebody in their life in other areas?
An
No way to-
unresolved one?
No way
No
to
way to
know.
know.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
one can
there's
know.
no way to know that.
Yeah, so that's why we're not messing with that. We're only doing with objective information. We need to know specifically, and this is what's happening, this is what's going on in life, as clear as we can. It's not going to always be cut and dry, but as clear as we can. So he needs to know, and the assumption behind it, kind of what's being presupposed, is if he brings up the difficult issues, then something good's going to happen, right? Is that fair?
No, not necessarily.
No.
Well, let's see it. Are there any good rules for bringing up difficult issues? He's trying to do something for a positive benefit. Those are the one things that we'll take as a given, the NLP presuppositions. So
Okay, that's fair.
Yes.
If you assume that avoiding a negative outcome is a positive outcome, then I'll give you that.
Okay. What do you think this guy wants?
You know, big picture, I'll get around to answering your question, but big picture, there's a problem there. We don't know what it is. We don't have a content, but he said, I'm going to bring this up again. So it's something that's really problematic for him, whatever it is. The first half of the response from the advisor here is just pop psychology gobbledygook, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Now, it can work. It's mostly silly fluff stuff, but it can work in the right situation. The second part of his response is what I thought was the really critical part, which is this guy needs to understand first what's going on. In other words, if you're in a marital relationship and something's obviously bothering you and all you get is essentially attacked for bringing up something like that, there's a much bigger problem in that relationship. So then you got to, like you said, Sean, start chunking down and figure out what the heck's really going on and why she can't talk about it, and et cetera, et cetera. Maybe using those silly fluff little rules to just start chipping away and figuring out what's going on, how to get to her in a calmer way. Maybe those will work. But there's some big stuff going on, and I mean, I don't know what I'd say to him, quite frankly, other than to try to understand better first.
Yeah, and so let's go ahead and break it down specifically, okay? So we're looking at the question. I tried bringing up the difficult issue, but my wife was furious at me, saying I had no right to blindside her and that she never wants to hear it. And so if we look at this in process, essentially I have this need to bring up a difficult issue. What we first know is that there's some kind of positive benefit that this guy gets for bringing up difficult issues. And I know we just lost Jude. I think he has to get his kids to bed or something. First off, he's getting a positive benefit by bringing up this issue to his wife, or so he seems. In his perception, doing this is going to give him some kind of benefit, right?
Otherwise, why would he do it?
Exactly.
Especially when he insists he's going to bring it up again. Why go through the pain? Yeah.
Exactly. So however that is, he believes that having up the difficult issue is going to be a positive thing. So that's the answer that he wants. If I take this even further and I look at what's his outcome for his relationship, well, that might be a little different. His outcome for his relationship might not be bringing up difficult issues for happiness, right?
Long-term happiness, possibly.
Well, I mean, he might just take that out and say, you know, my intent, my outcome for my relationship is happiness or connection or love or however that is. But we're seeing that this difficult issues is preventing it. So if I want to help him with this problem, what I'm going to look at doing is, okay, difficult issues. Okay, in his map of the world, at least now, this difficult issues is preventing him from having a connection, a love-based relationship. Is it fair?
Well, I mean, you're doing a little mind reading as to the specifics, but that's a fair.
Okay, how?
Discuss this.
Break down my mind reading.
Well,
How?
I mean, you know, certainly he's bringing it up for what he thinks is some positive outcome. We don't know what that is. Happiness, a better relationship. He may be, for example, deciding that it's time to end this relationship, and he wants to cause as many fights as he can and use that as the excuse to end it. And that would be a positive outcome for him.
Or he just simply wants to clear his conscience so that he no longer feels bad about keeping this information to himself, and he figures if he shares it with his wife, he's now come clean. His slate is clear. Now she'll just have to deal with it in her own way.
And that's his positive
outcome, right?
Fair enough, yeah. And what we then notice, I mean, for me, if I'm the therapist and he's coming for me, I'm generally going to be presupposed that he does want the successful marriage. So I think that's a fair one for us to run with. Although I see that as well for you guys. But the next step that we notice here is I bring up the issue, I have a problem, or she yells at me, gets furious. So now we have a structure of a problem, right? So essentially, I have a difficult issue, I bring it up, I have wife is furious. So if you look at it, it's a whole process that he does, okay? Using NLP, that's exactly how we break it down, right? So finished with her claiming I have no right to approach her, that I was just self-serving, selfish, all day, all the time. And he said, or he rallied against it, saying that he would bring it up again, which just brought more of the same. So what do you think the problem is for her?
She's got a really fucked up definition of what a marriage is, among other things, probably.
Wow. Tell us more about that.
That was a good mind read.
I know.
Yes. But it goes back to what I've already said. Because looking at her reaction, because again, back to what I said at the very beginning, you have to look at it from a positive attitude. And so that ought to be a given in a marital relationship, I would think. So if he has no right to bring certain things up and she's blindsided and he's selfish all the time, it seems to me like she's the one that's being incredibly selfish.
What is she reacting to exactly?
Well, that's what we don't.
Because I feel like there's a lot of qualification of the context, and we don't really know anything about what kind of things are going on in the midst of this being brought up. So,
I agree, and we don't know, and but I'm not sure that in this context that it matters. I'm having a hard time trying to imagine a situation in that kind of a relationship where one party could claim or the other one should feel as if they have no right to A or B, period, end of statement.
Well, okay, I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm focusing in on this word blindside, about something about the timing of it. Is what's really sort of standing out to me. So I can say this, I'll give a specific example. And this isn't with a romantic relationship, but it's with some familial relationships that I have, where these people in my family have a pattern of bringing up very important, weighty, emotional issues right before I'm about to walk out the door, or we are about to part ways, possibly for an indefinite amount of time, given that I'm an adult and I don't really live, usually live with my family anymore. But, you know, that is a situation where I'm having to leave, maybe to go do something important, something that's really important to me, something that I need to be focused and clear on. I had a family member do this to me right before I was about to go to a very important job interview, where I'm not saying that marriage should never include bringing things up or bringing up weighty issues. I mean, I get your point in that, but I can see how the timing of it could feel like someone else is being selfish.
Right.
Fair point. Absolutely. But I took a lot more context from all of that than you did. In other words, you have no right. And he said he would be bringing it up again, so different timing, and he got more of the same. And again, in the context of a marriage. So I will grant you in different types of relationships and in certain situations, but even then, I wouldn't think that would be an appropriate response to yell and scream and you have no right and I'm blindsided.
But
yes.
I have the question of, what if that's all content? You have no right to blindside me. I don't ever want to hear it, blah, blah, blah. What if that's all content?
I'm not grokking that. Can you help me understand that a little better?
One of the things that Tony Robbins says, and this is a little bit of imposing a map, so that's why I bring him up, is that every communication is either a cry for help or a loving response. In this, I see it as a cry for help. I see this woman being hurt. She's hurt.
Well, that in a general sense is probably a fair statement, but that's what I was saying earlier. Is she hurt by him and what he said or has done in the past or did just now, or is she hurt by the way she grew up and her poor understanding of what a
does it matter? Does it matter who installed the trigger or who installed the button or where the button's coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. Let me. That's a good question, though. I mean, if she's hurt by some past relationship, and that's different. I don't know. I think it does. What? I'm gonna bail out of this. What do you think, Sean?
I see the structure of the communication. So what I'm looking at is I have this feeling. This feeling leads me to want to bring up a difficult issue with my wife. I bring up the difficult issue with my wife. She feels hurt. She has the reaction of this stuff. Being furious, she doesn't ever want to hear it again. If I'm a responsible communicator and I'm looking at my process leading to my wife being happy or having a good outcome with my wife of being happily married or connection or everything, that's me failing in my outcome.
There's no communication, only feedback.
And the message, the meaning of one's communication is the response you get.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see it structurally. It could be that she's crazy. She could be just freaking nuts and like flying off a handle and loose, but women are very good at this. They're very good at knowing who's right, knowing who's wrong, and being able to deal with that. If this is the case, generally a woman will come back and say, you know what, I was wrong. Most women are pretty good at this.
I would agree with you only if you said that most men are really good at that also. I think that's a statement that I would ask you to support, but I'm not sure it's relevant to what we're talking about right now.
Okay. Good to go forward, or you want to stop and touch on that briefly?
Well, so I'm trying to imagine myself as the NLP practitioner giving him advice to, so let's say the trigger doesn't matter whether it's the husband or whether it's a past relationship or something else.
We can chunk it down. Even in the article, it says that when you criticize me, I feel demeaned. So we could essentially assume that maybe she's criticizing him. And he brings it up and says, you know what, I don't want you to criticize me. And that's the difficult issue. And then that's what she responds with, you have no right to do that, I'm furious, on and on and on. Or something like that.
Wasn't that just an example from the practitioner here, the counselor?
Yeah. So it could be something else. I think it likely is.
So let me ask you this. Is it ever the case, so if we assume those presuppositions of NLP that, there's no, what is that? No failure, only feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the other one?
No good and bad.
Well,
the meaning of your communication is the response you get.
That's it. Yeah. Is it possible that there are some people that you could never communicate with in a productive sense?
And I would say it requires specificity on your outcome of a productive sense, because you can go to an insane asylum and you can communicate with them, but if it'll take you anywhere, I'll be interested to see.
Okay, fair point. I remember some of those examples from Bandler and Grinder.
Bandler had success with it, yeah.
So enter into or respect their model of the world, enter into their model of the world.
So for example, if this woman's like batshit crazy and you still want to have a successful relationship, well, then at that point, it's going to require you to move a lot and be able to really be flexible in your communication. And then at that point, I would ask the person, if I'm a practitioner and I'm helping them, is this outcome really worth the cost and what it's going to take for you to develop as a communicator?
Okay, so theoretically, you're saying it's always possible, but the costs may not be worth it?
Exactly. And so if you want to go and help all the homeless, I mean, it's going to take a little while. You can go and take them all to eat at McDonald's, and you can do it. But there's going to be a pretty big cost in getting them on their way. But if you wanted to help somebody that's rich, and it might be a little bit easier, you guys might be on the same level, not necessarily rich, poor kind of thing, but just levels of connection. So the distinction that I'm trying to make is somebody that's just totally different in their map of the world, say like crazy and stuff. And then your map, say it's somewhat normal. You have to go and find them at their map of the world if it's batshit crazy, and potentially lead them over to where you want, or stay in batshit crazy.
Right. So one quick question on this then, Sean, because I just see this as like a never-ending circle in terms of the husband trying to figure out how to break through with a woman who says, you have no right. I mean, that's a pretty absolute statement, right?
Yeah.
And when he reiterates, she reiterates. So do you have one thought that would give any of us an idea on where you would start trying to break through that circle?
I think he violated one of her values. This is also a little bit from Tony Robbins. When we feel that one of our key values has been compromised, we get really, really upset by that. Violated.
Seems like a fair guess. Yeah. So how do you deal with violating a value?
For me, I mean, I think it's really to understand where you went wrong in it.
Wouldn't it be understanding what that value is?
That, yeah. Yeah, where was the value? What did you violate? How did you violate it? And how could you have done it better?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm starting to imagine in my own mind anyway, maybe he figures out a way to say, okay, you are not happy with what I said, so ask her questions about her reaction as opposed to the event. So what is it that I did wrong or something like that?
Potentially, right? Or it could be the case that you're trying to take her role. And so if you do come to that place with, what did I do wrong? Well, then you're a kind of student-teacher kind of role in the relationship.
Well, I mean, you're trying to respect and enter her model of the world, which seems like a good strategy in this case.
And she's your teacher for that. You just set the role. Does she want to accept that role? Does she not?
Well, that's
Mhm.
true, and you may not get a good reaction from that. But assuming that you do, and you could potentially,
So say for instance, I go on a date with Valerie and we have our first date, and I want to know how long it's going to take you to become my girlfriend. And we have that conversation, and I'm interested in getting there, and I want to know, can you teach me, like generally, how long does it usually take you to get a boyfriend, and how do you usually do that, and what's a boyfriend usually like? Do you want to be the teacher for me in that, or do you want to be a lover, kind of playful kind of role for that relationship? So that's what I see in it.
Mhm.
Because what we're doing here, and this is framing, this is setting rules around the relationship. And so I think we'll see this a little bit more clearly as it goes. But if I come back to this woman and I want to know, teach me how to be in love with you, teach me how to treat you, then that is kind of getting at that, which can be okay, but it just has certain implications behind it. For instance, would she really be interested in being a teacher at this point? I don't think so. She's pretty adamant that she doesn't want to deal with this right now.
well, but that's what I was saying. If you ask questions about her reaction as opposed to the subject itself, it seems like you're trying to understand her. The potential for her reacting well to that might be different than the subject itself. And it seems like a woman would respond positively to a guy trying to understand her better, ask her questions, and she's leading and teaching. But if done well, you could actually be leading when she thinks she's leading also.
And my question would be, in this moment right here when she blows up, what does she need?
Direction. She needs
What you-
direction, and she needs an opportunity to craft a different response. And the way that she's being approached right now, she only feels like she has one option, or this is her default option. So if there's leading, direction, and other outcomes, other options presented, then that's where she might break state and break her default reaction. That's my take on it.
Right, because one of the things I was thinking is, if he were to say, after she blows up and says, excuse me, you have no right to blindside me, and everything else she says, and if he just came back and said, you know what, you're right, I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but I blindsided you, and I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah.
And when would be a good time to bring this? When would be a good time for us to discuss this? If it is a
right
issue,
I like
when
that much
under
better.
what circumstances is the right environment? Not at the family gathering while we're trying to get the kids piled into the car and we're late to go see Aunt Sally. Is this not the right time? Oh, good. Thanks for letting me know. I mean,
I would say that what she needs most in this moment, and this is me kind of mind reading, is that she needs to be heard. She needs to be understood. She's hurt. She felt violated, and she wants to be understood. So she attacks. And one way to respond to attack is to attack back, which is what he did. And my question to him is, would that lead you to your outcome, or would retreating or giving up be a more opportune way for you to get your outcome? So she goes further, or he goes further. Do you have any suggestions or rules for dealing with issues like this? I'm looking for tools to help me set the tone in a loving way while being aware of my nice guy tendencies. So what's presupposed in this?
he's a pushover.
But he's a nice guy.
Yeah. What
At
else?
least he is. Well, that, and he's saying he wants to find a loving way of approaching her.
Okay.
So I think from there we can presuppose, like you were saying earlier, Sean, that he does, he I can't remember what you said. I'm sorry. My brain's a little foggy.
But he does want at least the outcome of having some kind of love in the relationship or connection. Yeah. What one more thing that's being presupposed in that sentence? It's hugely important for us.
So he's looking for
Plural,
tools.
more than one tool.
Yeah.
More than one strategy.
One other thing.
How to lead.
Oh, set the tone. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So somehow this guy has the idea that it's important for him to set the tone, or he needs to set the tone, or setting the tone would be in his benefit.
Well, he said set the tone in a loving way.
In
As
a loving
opposed-
way or in an unloving way, it's important for him to set the tone.
I guess I would read that as he's aware that when he begins a conversation, he's setting a tone, whether it's a loving way, whether it's an attacking way, whether it's a pushover, nice guy kind of way, but he's aware of his communication and in that it sets a tone.
Well, and we have to be aware of the generalization there. It helps me set a tone. Okay, what is a tone? A tone to who? How do you know that that's a tone? Who said that was a tone? What does that mean? That's just generalization for us.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And this generalization is going to do what for you? That's also another generalization. If I set the tone, then I'm going to have a loving relationship. Could be the implication. Could be a complex equivalent in that.
Yeah, setting a loving tone will get a positive response.
Yeah. So one of the meta model programs that I would do is saying, okay, setting the tone. What specifically does that mean? Okay, setting the tone does what for you? And specifically that setting the tone will do this outcome for you. Or I could say, how do you know, or what would happen if you didn't set the tone? That would give me clear instinctions of what this guy is looking to do with the relationship.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
He goes further, and so this is the response fire guy, and so it sounds like you're looking for rules to help you relieve your anxiety and to help make sure your wife responds positively when you bring up issues she doesn't want to talk about. Stephen, I think you're right in this, where you said it's kind of just therapy speak. But what is he doing there? Even if it is therapy speak.
Building rapport.
Pacing and leading, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he kind of breaks state, which I like. So sorry, I don't have any rules for that. Okay, now I'm paying attention. You paced my reality and then you broke state. So it's hypnotic in essence.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes on to say, here's what I suggest. When something is on your mind, maybe first talk with a buddy or therapist. If it is just your stuff, deal with it. It seems like something that needs to be discussed. If it seems like something that needs to be discussed with your wife, then do it without rehearsing or trying to do it in a way that will get a positive response for her.
Well, that's exactly what he's asking about.
Yeah.
How do I do it in a way that'll get a positive response?
Uh-huh. Let's break this down specifically. So I want to look at this. If it's just your stuff, deal with it.
In a marriage, is anything just your stuff?
Or this presupposes that sometimes some stuff is her stuff and sometimes some stuff is my stuff.
Mhm.
What's the
That's
distinction?
what I'm saying. Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there a distinction? I'm not.
There has to be, or it's really bad advice, right? How do I know it's my stuff? I don't know. It seems like my stuff. Who's to judge?
Well, that's what I'm saying. In a marriage, is anything just one person's stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Because no matter what it is, it affects the other person. At the very least, it affects the other person. And that other person ought to be the one that can help them see that maybe it is just their stuff and they need to see it differently, or they need to be able to deal with it differently. And it seems like that's the appropriate first person to try to talk to, not your buddies. What the hell do they know about your marriage?
Interesting.
They don't have to know anything about your marriage. The purpose is just to listen and get that first kind of run with all the inappropriate language and inflection out of the way.
So you weren't here, Valerie, for my first question, and I'm really curious on your thoughts on this.
Sorry,
So,
I was in bed. But he's in bed now, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you can see the highlighted, or you could see the highlighted thing that, it said, just talk to your buddies first and see if it's just your stuff. So my question was, in a marriage, is anything just your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Especially when I disassociate my projected motives from the other person. So, clearly when my husband does this, he's trying to elicit a certain response, or he's trying to make me feel this way. I mean, that's all projection.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I can absolutely have stuff that's 100% me.
So one of
How
my
do you know?
Yeah.
I know from the absolute look of surprise when I've brought things up with my late husband. I know from the complete non-involvement that's become clear after I stop mind reading and we actually talk about it.
Okay, well, that kind of leads to my second question, which was, so I see your point. I'm not sure I completely agree, because my statement was, at the very least, it's going to affect your spouse. So is it really just yours? But
I'm
the
not
question
saying
is,
I'm not saying that my baggage doesn't impact the relationships that I'm in. I'm just saying that it's really the stuff, it's the joys that I bring to the relationship, exclusively. It's not something that I created with my spouse. It's not a dynamic that I've established just with them. It's not the first time that I've ever had that experience. That there's nothing about certain things that are exclusive to my marriage.
okay, I see your point. I also think you're much more self-aware than your average person.
I agree. I agree with you, Stephen, wholeheartedly.
But then the next sort of follow-on question is, who would be, in a marriage, the best first person to go to deal with just your stuff?
My therapist.
Really?
I'm gonna take this a step further, and I'm gonna say, if we're looking at this in the structure of the problem, we see that this guy has a feeling, then he has a need to talk about it. He talks about it, anger for her, then the problem, right? So what's recommended here, when something's on your mind, maybe first talk with a buddy or therapist. That resonates with me with this feeling, instead of having somebody else fix my problem. So I have this feeling, I'm going to talk about this feeling. That's going to get potentially my anger or something unresolved. I'm a big proponent of not making your girlfriend, your wife, your mom. So if we look at the example presented here, he's criticized, and then what was presented to us in this article was that if he has the, if it would scroll for me, but he was presented with the situation where the guy is criticized, and then he talks to her about it. So if I have this feeling of feeling criticized, then I need to talk about it. Well, maybe it's the case where I need to look at it first myself. That's my point behind it. And so that's when I think about it. If it's just your stuff, deal with it. I would just say, let's throw it all and have it be my stuff. Let's have everything. Because the message, the communication, the meaning behind my communication is the message I get. So I would say it's hard to have a distinction on that. For me, if I'm in the relationship with this person and I'm not getting the outcome that I want, I make it all my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts with the feeling. What I would do is suggest to call your mom. Talk about the feeling. I'm feeling insecure. I'm feeling judged. I'm feeling unloved. Now, I suggest this for many reasons. First of most, say you bring up a difficult emotion with your wife. Now, what that's doing is it's always going to be anchoring those feelings with her.
Mm-hmm.
So even to have this need to talk about it and to talk about it, bring up these uncomfortable emotions, it's anchoring all these negative feelings with you. For why? What's the outcome in it? If you want to have a successful relationship, huh?
Not to mention the ammunition that you're handing over, because future things that are completely unrelated can be looked at through that same lens. Oh, does this have to do with your problem? with your other problem.
Yeah. Let's say he's insecure, just a little bit insecure, and she's criticizing him a little bit, okay? And then he has this feeling, oh my gosh, I feel criticized. Baby, I don't like it when you criticize me. I want you to do this instead. If we look and we see that advice, what's basically happening is I have this feeling of being criticized, and then I have a need to talk about it with somebody, and then I'm bringing criticism or bad feelings to the relationship, when if my outcome is just to have a happy relationship with this woman, it's preventing me or putting boundaries to do that. In the way that I see it. That's a little bit of mind reading there, though, for you guys.
I'm not sure I agree, but you've definitely given me some good stuff to think about.
I'll go further with it because it reiterates the whole article. So then we look at if it needs, or if it seems like something that needs to be discussed with your wife, then do it without rehearsing or trying to do it in a way that will get a positive response from her. So don't try to have success in this. Don't rehearse. Don't do this. Why? Because if something has been spinning in your head for some time, there's probably no way it's going to come out without sounding accusing or having a lot of energy build up behind it. Now, I do agree with that will happen, but the message behind this communication is don't rehearse this. Don't try to get it right because you're going to get it wrong. Well, let me know if you guys see something different.
Well, that's definitely what he's saying. But, and I can see how that can make sense, but he did that already. He did it in a way that didn't try to get a positive response, and he didn't rehearse it, and it was a negative response. So
Yeah.
It seems like a fair reaction on his part then to say, okay, I need to do something different. How can I get a positive response? But he's reinforcing that he shouldn't do that.
Yeah. It goes further and says that when you do bring up difficult issues with your wife, try the 2-sentence rule. So, for example, when you criticize me, I feel demeaned. So the implications for us in NLP is essentially when I have X feeling, or when you do X behavior, I feel Y behavior. If we look at it structurally, you do this behavior, I have this feeling. Who has the power in that?
The wife.
The wife, every single time. And so I'm telling my wife, you have the power because you did this behavior. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's
also
the pop psychology gobbledygook that I don't buy into. But
I'm also telling her that her behavior has led me to feel this way. This is a negative feeling, and I'm associating myself with these negative feelings. So I feel demeaned when you criticize me. Okay, now you feel bad because I feel this way. My emotions are your responsibility. That's the implication that I'm giving her.
right.
Wow, that's a pretty shitty implication to give somebody that you love and you care for and you want to have a successful relationship with. So number 2, he says that he'd like for him to do it in this way. So combine these two together. When you criticize me, I feel demeaned. And instead of being critical, I would like you to just ask me for what you want as if I was your best friend. How do you guys feel about this?
I like the clarity that it demands from the other person. So rather than telling me what you don't like, tell me the replacement behavior that you want instead. And I think it's so easy for marital conflict to be, this is what I don't want you to do. And there's not enough of the, this is what I do want instead. I think the challenge is, and now I'm projecting from personal experience, is trying to date people that really don't know what they want. That's incredibly sign me up for the convent kind of, feeling of just, I want to give up already and start adopting cats.
How do you feel when people direct your behavior?
It depends on the value exchange in that given relationship. So if I feel some kind of debt to this person, and I'm not using that in a negative way, but if I feel like turnabout's fair play. I owe them something. I need to make up for something. Or if I am in a role of wanting to please this person, then for me, clarity on what it is they want is thrilling because I don't have to think so hard or guess or surmise and have experiences of getting it wrong. If the value exchange is different and I feel like the debt is more the other way, or there are a whole bunch of things that I'm not getting out of the relationship that I need, like my needs aren't being met, then it'll feel demanding and it probably wouldn't be very well received. I probably would think in my head, I'll just add it to the list, honey, of things that you want, which is not my baseline personality. But
what about one of those conditions, be not debt but trust, for example? If you're in a trusting relationship, say.
What's that mean, trust? What's that like?
Fair question. Let me just sort of reframe that and say, I would hope that trust would be an implicit primary.
I trust myself.
Yeah. Would you trust your husband? Would that be implicit in a marital relationship?
I think that waxes and wanes depending on behavior. And just so you know, Stephen, for me, that didn't really threaten the overall relationship. To have it wax and wane was not like a deal breaker for me.
But was it an indication of a healthy or less healthy relationship?
Again, waxing and waning. Did I always get what I wanted out of every moment of the 10 years that I was with my late husband? No.
No, I wouldn't use that as a definition of a healthy relationship, just getting what you want. But
why not?
I'll let her have it.
You just said I was a self-aware person. So.
Okay.
I want to get back to
this.
This.
Is not going where I wanted it to go, so I'll defer to Sean.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. Barb, what happens in you if somebody tells you this? So let's just say, and do a little role play here. If Stephen comes to you and says, when you criticize me, I feel hurt. And then he says, instead of you being critical, I want you to just ask me what you want, as if I was your best friend.
In our relationship, that would work for me.
Okay.
But I've been in relationships where it hit me the wrong way, and it was kind of like, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And so, and when you first read that sentence right before we started discussing it here, that's why I've been quiet, because I'm like, man, it hits me kind of wrong, but then it hits me perfectly right. So, and I think that's probably why it's.
Are you talking about just number two? Just
no.
basically directing the
just saying, instead of being critical, I would like you to ask me for what you want. And
I'm going to kind of rail hard against this. And so I would agree with both you and Valerie in this, and that if you had trust or a really good relationship, maybe trust, maybe connection, maybe you guys really had a high value exchange, I would say this might be okay and something that could fly by. But the way that I see things, and generally, I think that successful relationships are done the same way as they're kind of just starting compared to how they're done over the years in many ways. So usually it's going to be bringing fun, good times to people and anchoring positive emotions, like are done in the first dates, that are done with couples that have been together for 50 years. They still have fun. They still play together, right? Mm-hmm. So when I look at this communication, I don't like it. And I'd go so far as to say that it's manipulative. And I would say that because as if I was your best friend. So this is putting a little carrot at the end of it. If you do what I want, then we can be best friends.
Yeah, I'm going to have to push hard back against that, John.
Okay, fair enough.
In
this, let me explain.
Every situation, but in this particular one where it's in a marriage, I would push back against that.
Okay, let me go a little bit even more in depth and explain how I see this. So when you criticize me, I feel demeaned. So you have control of my emotions. I'm not in control. It's your fault that I feel demeaned. Your fault that I feel hurt, unloved, whatever. It's your fault. And so instead of doing it that way, instead of doing the action that led for me to be hurt, instead of me being out of control, I would like to ask you to do it differently, which I don't have too big of a problem for asking it a different way, but I do have a problem with attacking the behavior. Because as we know with NLP presuppositions, everyone's always doing something in the best interest of themselves. So her being critical, her attacking you, her leaving you in a place where you're not in control, it was for her best interest. So instead of attacking that back, I accept it. That's okay. You're doing that in the best way that you could. Then trying to equate this and put it as if I was your best friend, that makes me feel bad. I mean, I don't want to put that on the carrot on top. So if I put this structurally, I say that essentially what's going on here, the structure of these sentences is that I'm telling my partner that when you do this behavior, I feel out of control. Or when you do this behavior, I'm out of control. It's your fault. And then my solution to that is, instead of you doing this behavior, instead of you making it so that I'm out of control, I want you to do this behavior instead. I want to change you. And once I change you, once you're different, once I have control, then we can be best friends.
Mm-hmm. So it's my way or the highway. It's on my terms.
I see it that way. I don't see it as I'm trying to help you get what you want so that I can get what I want as well. I'm seeing it more as you're preventing me from getting what I want because you're doing this behavior. So you need to change it. And then we can be best friends.
It's a move away from strategy. I need you to move away from who you are so that I can be somebody else in your presence.
So I was taking this slightly differently. I was taking our discussion about number 2 in the context of what Barb had mentioned, which is just number 2, or that was my interpretation of it anyway. So I agree completely. Number 1, then number 2, horrible. It's crap. I wouldn't do number 1. But number 2 only, is generally speaking much more acceptable to me. For example, just because someone being critical of you think's the wrong word. They act that way because they perceive it as being in their own best interest. Doesn't mean that it is in fact in their own best interest. It could be purely emotional. Even if it's in their best interest, it may very well be completely detrimental to the best interest of the relationship. And that's my point about a lot of these things, especially in this example here, because it's in a marriage. Mm-hmm. You know what? If I was in a dating relationship and my partner responded to me in that way, I would walk away about 10 days ago. I try to bring up something difficult. I get yelled at, screamed at, insulted. I bring it up again and I get more of the same. That tells me this person has no clue how to have a good, healthy relationship. I'm gone yesterday. Mm. But it's completely different in a marriage.
Fair.
So
interesting perspective, definitely.
I'm sorry.
Go for it,
How
Valerie.
is it different in a marriage? I'm just curious.
I'd say, and I'll let you jump in, Steve, when you have it, but essentially there's more investment there. And so you have a little bit more leeway. When you go and you first interact with a woman, she has to judge you right then and there on whatever you say, whatever you do. But after a marriage, she has the whole thing built up. For me, though, I say and I recommend that the communication should be the same or similar, because that's how you keep those things alive. So you have a little bit more leeway, a little bit more room for error. But if you do keep those things the same or very similar, there's the principles, they're sound. And what brought you together, they're sound in what will keep you together. You might have a dissenting opinion on that, though, Stephen.
No, I was only partially paying attention to you because I was trying to formulate my own thoughts too. But I think we're roughly on the same page, and that is to say, investment is maybe a really generic way to say it, but, and I will grant you, I've got certain definitions of marriage that not everybody may, but it seems like a fair definition of marriage is you have committed to each other and basically said, our relationship is now the most important thing. It's not me, it's not you, it's now an us. And in that context, that changes everything. So I realized as you were talking, Sean, that I was generalizing.
Okay, fair enough. That's an awesome generalization to bring to the forefront, because there's, I mean, with relationships, there has to be so many going on one time or another. You know, what's a marriage? What's a relationship? What's dating? What's that? You know, it's all together. I'm going to keep this moving, though, because we got not too much time. May go over if that's okay with you guys, but I mean, there's a lot of value here that'll come up here, and I think it's important for us to get through some more. So next, what happens, and the point of I bring that up is that essentially the structure in that is the solution of the problem. What's being proposed here is that you need to change the person. They need to feel differently. They need to act differently so you can feel differently. That's what's being proposed here. So I look at it differently, and he relates it a little bit better next when he says a couple other tools I suggest is you take ownership of the problem. I agree with this. I think you need to look at what's making you feel this way. So if it's her criticizing you, you need to really look at it. Like, why is she criticizing me? She said I'm lazy and I need to get a job. Oh shit, we're 3 months behind on the rent. Yeah, I need to get a job. Okay, well that's a good thing for my wife to do for me, right? But if she's just like, you're a lazy piece of shit, and I just got home from doing a 10-hour day, well, okay, then that might not be me, right? Then I need to look at myself and say, you know, where is it inside of me that this criticism is necessary? And this is where I go back to women are really good at this. They're really good at bringing out what a man is capable of. So if he is lazy, he needs to get a job and do that, then they'll usually be able to bring that out. It could be that they do it through criticizing. But I really say to look at it yourself and understand where in this is it your deal. And then the second part of it is to look at it and see, and I always do parts integration with this. So it's the man, it's the woman, and they both want to come together in this highest intent of a relationship. Now, that should be the highest intent. If they both align and they both want to, say, have a happy marriage, then they should be able to figure it out. Now, if she's going about it and she's trying to be critical to do it, well, then that's probably the wrong way to go about it, and then the parts are going to disagree. So that's when the parts need to come together and figure out how she can better achieve her outcome of having that relationship by doing better behaviors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What next he says is this is usually a good idea because you probably wouldn't be bringing it up if you didn't have a problem with it. Absolutely. He has a problem with whatever she's given him, he brings it up. For example, you might begin with saying, I have a problem. Can you help me come up with ideas to resolve it? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't like this, and I don't like this because it's baiting her. If he had more accurate communication, if he told her what is actually going on, it would be, I have a problem with you. Can you change yourself for me?
You're mind reading there.
You're
also assuming that he's not being genuine in that statement.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
He could be genuinely thinking that I have a problem. It may not be me, or I have a problem, but really it's us, and we need to work on this together. So can you help me come up with ideas to resolve it?
Yeah, and one of the
solutions, building rapport and getting her involved in it.
Okay, fair enough. What, Valerie?
I was just say one of the solutions might be, just stop feeling that way.
Exactly.
Take some responsibility for your feelings.
Yeah, it's all his problem that she's not coming home at night and spending her time with other guys. It's totally
Well, what situation would he
I'm
need
just
to
pointing out
inspire?
we don't know the content, and there could very well be. It really, when I hear this, take ownership of the problem, I think that's at best superficial, if not gimmicky.
I think
How
down
do I
to the
take
core,
ownership
it's
of
what
the
he needs
problem
to
other
do.
than to lead the marriage? If that's the case, if that's the content.
I think at the core, it's what he needs to do. He has this problem with his wife. He needs to look at how he can fix it. It's his problem. It's not hers. So this solution is to bring her and have her be the helper, the problem solver.
Right, because
Right.
what he's saying, what we know so far in all of this, is his problem is that she lashes out at him when he tries to bring up a difficult situation. That's his problem, is that he cannot bring up a difficult situation with her because she lashes out.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to agree with you, Sean, by him saying, I have a problem. Can you help me come up with ideas to resolve it? Is kind of setting her up, because she's thinking, if somebody were like, if Stephen were to say that to me, and I'm thinking, okay, he's got a problem. I'm sure it's work related. Let me talk to him and see how I can help. And all of a sudden he's like, okay. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? Well, the problem is you criticize and lash out at me. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so I can see,
Or we go back to 1 and 2, what they say here, I have this problem, and they spring that on you.
Right. And depending on if somebody, and this is truthful in the past, where somebody says, you act this way, so therefore I feel this way. I've looked at them and said,
That's one.
Right, which I agree with you, Steve, because in the past when I've had boyfriends say that to me, I have said, I am not in control of your emotions and how you feel. You are. Mm-hmm. So choose a different way to feel. And I've kind of put it back on them it's their issue for how they feel, not mine. I've even done that with nieces and nephew family members.
Beautiful.
That's your choice. If you want to feel that way, feel that way.
He adds to it and says, there's no blame here, and you haven't put your partner on the defensive. Well, I totally agree. You haven't put them on the defensive yet, but you're about to. Mm-hmm. I have the problem, and it's you.
Right.
Then he says, you might say something like, I get really anxious when you raise your voice with the kids. I know it is my stuff, but do you have any ideas how we can work together to lower the volume in our home?
Pretty sneaky.
Sneaky, absolutely.
I think it's disingenuous.
That's how sneaky it is.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think his solution is? I mean, just say it, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to lead you to the answer, and you're playing this little game with me. And so then he goes on to say, or I love having a sexual connection with you. I know you've been stressed lately with work, but I'm wondering how we can keep our sexual connection intact without you feeling overwhelmed. It's a little better. What do you think, Valerie?
I'm thinking about it through the lens of my mediation training, where you're stating it's the classic position versus interest. So in this example, the position would be, I want to have a sexual connection, and we would presume that the other position is, I'm too overwhelmed to have a sexual connection. So it would be presuming a common interest, that she also loves having that sexual connection, which we don't really know is the case. But if that common interest were there, then this might work.
And bridge the gap.
Position. We have a common interest in keeping our sex life alive. How can we do this without overwhelming you? I think it's okay.
He goes further to say, another ownership approach is start out by saying, I owe you an apology. This always gets a woman's attention. To what you said, Valerie, it does. And I would say, it's just like clickbaiting. It's just like baiting her into something, because is this guy really sorry?
Well, if it's not genuine, if the person really does owe you an apology and they really believe that, then that can be a really good approach.
Yeah.
If it's just an attention-getting gimmick, then I think it's a bad idea, because that will probably make itself obvious pretty quickly, and then you'll feel like you've just been gamed.
Let's combine all these. If we go ahead and we start it by saying, I owe you an apology. And then I say, essentially, let's say, when you criticize me, I feel demeaned. Instead of being criticize you, I would like you to ask for what you want as a friend. If we look at the structure there, what I see is, I owe you an apology. Okay. This is like should be a level of like, okay, intent and love and care and connection, but it's really more an attempt to change the person. So really, I'm just giving you this false feeling, a gimmick.
Yeah. It's disingenuous, and it's a gimmick that becomes quickly obvious in the example you just gave, I think.
So then the solution is to take ownership in a sincere way, not a nice guy, passively pleasing way, for your lack of leadership or avoidance or passive aggressive way of letting a problem build in the relationship. You can fill in the blank. So he didn't lead the relationship. So for example, he says, you might say, I owe you an apology. I haven't been setting the tone and taking the lead when it comes to our sexual relationship. I've been passive and indirect. I have acted in ways that feel burdensome to you. My commitment to you is to be more conscious of taking full responsibility for my needs and approaching you in a way that feels loving and not needy. How do you guys feel about that?
It's a huge mind read.
Huge.
He doesn't know that. Huge, yeah. He doesn't know that that's the nature of their sexual relationship at all.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's great if you know exactly that's her map of the world and you want to connect with her. And what a woman really wants in this, she wants to feel heard and understand and have some kind of faith that things are going to be different or better in the future. Which this is like throwing a whole bunch of shit up against the wall and hoping it matches exactly the same.
And isn't contraindicated. Isn't the exact problem, right?
Yeah. My solution to this is go in and understand the person, like really understand what's going on with her. Like ask her questions and really get to the point of like, okay, what's stopping us from connecting? Is it really me being passive and stuff? And if it is, the best apology I can make for it is apologize right on the spot and then change it. I don't need to have some kind of long-winded, I'm committed to this. In addition, what that commitment does, and that's, things are going to be different, baby. What that does for the relationship is it sets expectations and it sets you up for failure. Okay, so what happens the next time you drop the ball? You're expected to apologize and make a whole new vow of commitment to make things differently. Just fix it.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm kind of just mind reading a whole lot here or imposing my model, but we're running a little bit low on time and I want to get a lot of value out of it.
I think that's something that I've realized, Sean, as we go through a number of these different exercises. I did this with Valerie once when it was her reaction to her boss's reaction to something. And I realized there was really no way to be helpful with, I thought at the time anyway, I could be most helpful by doing a bit of a mind read, which ended up being fairly accurate, Valerie said. But it seems like that's not a bad tool if it's somebody that you think you know well enough to be able to do that with. Does that sound right?
And if you're really accurate, yeah. I would say, the most accurate that you could be is really get as much of an understanding of their world as you can. But even then, you're still going to be, kind of looking in the dark. You can only know so much about a person and their experience and what they've had to lead them to that experience.
I think it's different if you do a mind read and then you're so stuck to it that there's nothing the person can say or do that moves you away from your predetermined motive and outcome for the other person. That's harsh and unyielding and hard to work with. If somebody's perceptive and they take their best guess at what might be going on and it turns out to be spot on or close enough, or they're at least open to being corrected, then I think it can be a time saver.
That makes a lot of sense. So basically you're saying if you've got more flexibility, then you've got more power.
Yeah, I had a former boss tell me that. He said recently, I've never met anyone, no, I'm exaggerating. He didn't say it like that. But he said to me, you are incredibly opinionated and incredibly open all at the same time.
Oh, that's a great compliment.
Yeah, yeah, and he meant it as a compliment. But yeah, I said,
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd add to it and say, what's more powerful, the earth or the water?
Talking about the flexible water wears away the rocks kind of thing.
Yeah. Water will weather down rocks over time, or it'll move around it, or it'll move through it. It has the power of destruction, has the power of life. He goes further and says there is no guarantee that any of these approaches will elicit a positive response from your partner. It could be that she has a lot of toxic shame, needs to be in control, or needs to always claim the moral high ground of projecting that she never does anything wrong. What is this?
This is his first and second wife.
Yep.
Which he pretty much, you want to ask me how I know, he pretty much confirms that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. I don't know. What is toxic shame? What the hell is that?
Right.
This person has this toxic shame, this person doesn't. How am I supposed to know? Okay, so now this person has toxic shame and now I can't have a connection with them? Okay, we just set a boundary to our relationship and our connection with them.
And there's no one who needs to be in control. I mean, it kind of presupposes that a need to be in control is evil.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone should be out of control and okay with that.
And this moral high ground stuff, what is that? How do I know if this person has a moral high ground?
Mm-hmm.
It's generalizing a lot there.
What did you just say, Valerie? Everybody should be out of control and be okay with it?
I was kind of poking fun at the whole idea that the need to be in control is problematic, because this is just me, my experience in this world is that everyone has some modicum of control that they have to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's different thresholds for different people. Some people are more flexible in certain circumstances, but in general, I think everyone has some need to be in control. And if you get them too much into the out of control realm, whatever that is for them, then they behave then their behavior changes.
So I agree with you completely, but the thought that flashed through my mind was going back to your description there at the beginning of the guy that you were on your third date with. And so not getting into the content of that particular guy, but it seemed to me that one possible interpretation of what you were saying was, I want him to be dominant, I believe you used that word, and in control, and always, because you started having problems, you said, when he started giving up control to you. And as you remember, I asked a question about, could there be good reasons for that? Maybe he's afraid, or maybe he's trying to be flexible and show you that it would be an interactive relationship. And again, not that guy. I'm just talking conceptually in general about dating here.
Structurally, I think for myself, what I want is to be led in a romantic relationship. And personally, that comes from the reality that in most parts of my life, I fulfill a very masculine role. I lead a team at work. I cast vision at work. At home, I'm the mom and the dad. I have so many responsibilities that I just want to have one part of my life where I can follow, because I know I'm capable of following. And I know that in a romantic relationship, that is where I am most likely to actually be a follower. So I think there's a difference between need for control or having a tight rein on things versus what this person was proposing, which was, hey, person with great leadership skills, which is me, I want you to lead this. And that's where I lost interest.
So I completely get it. So I see your point about understanding who you are, and I agree completely, totally respect that. I love women that are like that, quite frankly. And I want to abstract from that particular guy. But what if your husband was exactly the same way? Full-time employee, leader, visionary, et cetera, and he wanted the same thing. He wanted to give up some of that responsibility of leading at times and just look to you and depend on you. But that didn't work for you. And not doing it didn't work for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my late husband wasn't like, I mean, that wasn't an issue
I
for
don't
us.
think it would
I'm
be
just
an issue.
I'm just asking conceptually, and my point is the whole flexibility thing.
I think that person would become my best friend, but not my husband. I think there would be other opportunities for relationship, but I can't see how a romantic relationship would flourish in that because, and this is my problem, not this fictitious person's problem, but I would feel burdened.
Interesting.
I think that's well stated in a feminine essence.
Yeah.
Everything that I've seen over years and years of dealing with women, that's what they want.
I think that's exactly right, Sean.
I'd go a little bit further and kind of give you a little bit more context about this guy and his following. Generally, what he's looking at doing is having guys move out of being a nice guy. And so what he wants and who he's talking to is guys that have kind of been stepped on. And so a lot of his marketing message is that you need to take back control of a relationship. You need to lead. You need to set the tone in the relationship. Now, this message, you need to set the tone in the relationship, presupposes that doing that or setting a tone is a good thing, that it needs to be done, that it's going to be beneficial for the relationship. Also, probably that it's a man's role. And that's essentially what he's getting through a lot of his marketing. And so it's one of the ideas that I think might be fundamentally flawed with this, is that what happens if you just let go of control and don't need to have control over it? And so if we look at an extreme situation of somebody that doesn't need to have control, but somebody who can lead, what we're looking at is maybe like a king or some kind of president or something like that. Do you think he really needs to set a tone too much? Generally, they don't. Maybe it's done once or twice, but after that, everybody pretty kind of much knows their role, what they're expected of, what they're to do. Maybe a company leader. Stephen, I know you got something else there going on, but if I'm in a group with my friends and we're established friendships, maybe it's been 5 years and everything, everybody kind of knows that I'm the leader. But let's say somebody else comes in and they want to be the leader. What they're going to do, what they're going to try to do, the common assumption is that they're going to try to verbalize it and make them the leader, lead the group by verbalization. What happens then is only further pushing them away from being the leader.
You're talking about two different types of leadership. Because you started talking about corporate leadership, a president, a king, et cetera, and then you talked about, and that's formal leadership, and then you started talking about informal leadership. I don't think there's a formal leader in a group of friends.
There may not be, or there may be, but if we look at the structure level, it's always going to be the informal leader. It doesn't necessarily have to be formal. It can be, it doesn't matter. Structurally, the leader. So if we look at a corporation, it might not be the CEO. It might be the CFO. But the tone is already set. You kind of already know who's setting the direction, and everybody just falls underneath that. He isn't out there telling you, I'm the leader, I'm the leader, I'm the leader. When somebody is out there doing that, you often find that they aren't the leader.
That's true. I was interpreting setting a tone slightly differently.
So if you see it in a relationship and you have the man and the woman dynamic, if the guy's like, I need to set the tone, I need to set the tone, I need to set the tone. The more that he communicates that, and the more the wife is like, okay, baby, set the tone, set the tone, set the tone. Who's really setting the tone?
The woman who's letting him get away with it.
Yeah.
Southern women have an expression for that, and it goes something like, I just let you think that you're in control.
Yep. So yeah, in that core message, I don't necessarily think that a tone needs to be set, or some kind of leadership, or I need to take control of my relationship again. That's
depends upon what you mean by setting a tone. You know, conceptually speaking, this last part here is where I started agreeing with this guy much more. Specifically when he says, well, just one example, but he says a woman's reaction to anything that a man does not determine the rightness or wrongness of the thing the man did. Absolutely true. And I'm sure I can probably come to a better understanding, but agreeing with that completely, I think that's not negotiable, really. I think that's sort of factual. But then I have a hard time.
Hold on, Barb. Okay. Valerie, what do you guys think? We take that as face value?
Even take the men and the women out of it. somebody's reaction to anything that somebody else does doesn't determine the rightness or wrongness of the thing that that person did. Make it generic.
You guys agree? Yeah, well, we make it generic.
But I
What do
agree.
you think?
I agree with that, because their reaction is coming from their map of the world.
Okay.
And so there's no rightness or wrongness about what the person did. It's just the other individual had their reaction based upon their map of the world.
Valerie?
I'm really not sure.
It's too general for me. The rightness or wrongness to who? According to whom? According to God, according to Buddha? I don't know.
Fair point.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, somebody else's reaction to something, let's make it even more generic, doesn't say anything about me.
You can generally get along with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that presupposition that we have about something about the intent of your communication doesn't matter?
But that's about communication. That's not about that person and this person. Though that's I knew you were going to ask that, or I was already thinking it, I should say. But
yeah,
that's a fair question. But
What are they going to ask next? I'm just thinking.
But that's exactly the problem or not the problem, but the struggle that I'm having is I'm trying to square this with take ownership of the, say, problem, which is really the reaction, right? And then that bridge between those two, I'm starting to actually see it more clearly now. The bridge between those two is that you're talking about different things. Talking about communication versus the actual situation itself, I think.
I think it's the same thing. I think anything that you do is a form of communication. If I go ahead and just mow the lawn for my girlfriend, if I bring her breakfast in bed, that's communication. It's an action, but it's communication as well, right? And I would take it and apply this statement with it and saying that it's not really, I don't have control over how somebody will respond to my reaction or my actions. That's what I would say, and to sum this up. So I can't control whether she yells at me for bringing her flowers or not. But I still own the responsibility in that.
You can only control your reaction to the reaction.
Yeah.
And that I agree with completely. That, which is taking responsibility for yourself, but not taking responsibility necessarily. But see, when I saw that, take ownership of, I interpreted that, granted, as, say, take ownership of her reaction. Now I can take ownership of my reaction to her reaction. I can't take ownership of her reaction. I can learn to communicate differently to get a different reaction.
And I think that you just use her reaction as a clue on how to do a better action. And I'll chunk this differently so you can see it in a different way. Let's say that I want to find and be happily married in my life with a wonderful wife that does X, Y, and Z for me. I can go ahead and say that the reaction is this one girl. I must get this one girl, and I could be attached to it, and I could tie everything into that, which would be the same as tying everything into this one reaction that I get with this one interaction with this one woman. I needed her to like me, to accept me, or on and on and on. Instead, a better way to see it is to have this vision, this outcome of I want this thing in life, whether this is a marriage and happy relationship. Okay, maybe it's this girl, maybe it's this girl, and it kind of just fits in there. Or for this communication, I want this woman to respect me or not to criticize me. Okay, that reaction wasn't exactly what I'm going for. So I use that as an adjustment to do my communication again and get a different kind of response. How's that sit with you guys?
I think you just described conversations that we have had in the past in one of your groups when you were here, Sean, about the difference between the way, how women date and how women have all the power in a relationship.
Okay.
And I disagreed with that, if you remember, because the women can only have the power if the guy gives it to her.
Yeah.
And so if the guy decides, like you just said, I've got to have this woman and I'll orient everything around getting that one reaction, versus I want someone who will be in a relationship with me that looks like ABC, then that woman doesn't have any power over you. Because if they, and hopefully you've defined that relationship in good, helpful, positive ways, but regardless, I think, if they're not that kind of a person, then they shouldn't have any power over you.
Yeah.
And if they are that kind of person, then they do have power over you, but you also have power over them because they're wanting the same thing.
Or it was given.
Or it was given, not taken.
Yeah.
Is that what yeah.
Let's go further. I'm just going to wrap it up here. And so, as you said, I've always said, or started off here. So I've always said a woman's reaction to anything that a man does doesn't determine the rightness or wrongness of the thing the man did. And so for me, it's really generic advice, like what's right, what's wrong. There's so many implications here. He needs to be more specific with this if I'm really getting down to it. If we get down to how we described it with you, Stephen, then that's a lot better for us. Yeah. And so then no matter how you bring things up, you might get a negative response. Absolutely true. And then he goes in, this was true for me in my first and second marriages. So obviously he's failed twice. His first wife would punish him for bringing up subjects she didn't want to talk about by going silent for days at a time. I soon learned which subjects were off limits.
She trained him well.
Conditioning.
You think this might actually be a good thing?
No, absolutely not.
Really? Okay. What do you think, Valerie?
I can see some value in it.
Okay.
If it's undiscussable, if it's not in the realm of discussability, then
what about understandability?
By being silent, they're not necessarily putting more words between them. And over time, he's complied to her rules about what's discussable and what's not discussable. So to me, when I read this, I hear classic NLP conditioning response.
Well, and I guess for me, it's what does he mean by going silent for days at a time? Is it going silent like she wouldn't even speak to him about anything? Or was it just going silent about that certain topic?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been in a relationship where the guy would get mad about things, and I'd be like, what are you so mad about? And he literally would avoid eye contact and speaking to me for 2 to 3 days.
Mm.
Did that help the relationship? Nope.
I have this, there are certain things that are undiscussable between me and my sister, and putting a verbal boundary in place with her only entices her to challenge it and to violate my value in that way. And so being quiet about that topic and not engaging in the conversation, because there's nothing that she could do that would make it discussable. At least there's nothing right now in her ability. So in some ways, do I think that this engenders intimacy with her? No, I don't think it does. It's a bit of stonewalling, but it also helps us to not have more toxic conversations, about something that is just that's off limits.
It's an away strategy. It's an away strategy, it sounds like.
Queen of the away strategy. For now.
Oh, I don't know. You might give John Grout a run for his money, but
I'm working on it, Steve. For now, yeah, you're right. It's an away from strategy.
This is.
I look at it as doing a bit of preservation, though.
Yeah.
I can understand that there are situations where an away strategy is the right one, and that's probably one of them. That makes sense to me in that situation.
I think you could apply it in a towards strategy too, though. I'm only going towards a happy, positive relationship with my sister. Anything that gets in the way of that, then we're just not going to go to that. We're just going to go around it. And so in this sense, what I see in it, if this is done appropriately, which I doubt that the wife was able to do, especially if he's feeling so resentful about it, if she was able to do it appropriately, she would have moved him away from topics that weren't really discussable. You know, I mean, some will argue that the more understanding, the more connection, and the more intimacy that you're going to have with somebody. Okay, so if we take that to an extreme, what does that mean? If I go ahead and tell the woman that I'm seeing that I used to wet the bed when I was 5 years old, are we going to be closer together? Yeah, probably. But is that going to take away some little attraction and the mystery from the relationship? Yeah, probably. And so what do I really want in the relationship? Do I want to be closer to her, or do I want to feel more attracted to me? Do I want to feel a little bit more mystery? What is it I'm really going after?
That's a fair point. So you just realized that, at least in my mind, this whole conversation, there was another generalization that at least I was making, which was that these are about the conversations are about things that matter. I don't know that really matters, but this obviously mattered to the guy.
And for the purpose that I'm seeing, just kind of my reading into it is that he wanted to make himself feel better. And so if I'm in a relationship to make myself feel better, that might be something I should look at. Because when I've seen in the models that I've studied in relationships, the ones who do it best, they don't need to be in a relationship to make them feel better. They don't need to be in a relationship to feel some kind of whole, but they want a relationship because they do feel better.
What about making the relationship better as opposed to making yourself feel better? My interpretation of it was that he wanted to make the relationship better.
And tell me the distinction.
It's probably the same distinction as owning my reaction to the reaction versus, taking ownership of the other person's reaction.
So there's a nominalization in what you had stated. You guys know? Barb, do you know?
Which part of what he stated?
Be more specific.
So we're looking at two things, right? So we're looking at what a person wants, and he wants to make the relationship better, or he wants to make himself feel better. If we're looking at that, what I see there is a nominalization in the relationship. A relationship, you put it in a wheelbarrow, it doesn't fit. So if we look at that, we can break that down and actually put it into a process. A relationship is a process of relating with somebody.
I think I see what you're saying. I'm not sure that I agree. In other words, because what I was thinking is more process oriented. In other words, she engages in particular behavior in certain circumstances. Those are processes that's damaging to the relationship. He's trying to figure out how to change that whole process to make the relationship better, which should in the end make him feel better and her feel better. And
should, right? Yeah. And I just say, if I'm looking at it, and I look at it in a parts integration, I have man, woman, and they go up in this thing, it's a relationship. This whole thing is a relationship together. Then what I'm looking at is getting them to that point of having their outcomes match. If they already do, then they can figure it out, right? And then what I'm looking at is this part wants this thing that gets in the way of connecting with this part. And so that's where I go to. This guy wants to feel better. He has this emotion, whether it's being criticized, demeaned, being hurt. He wants to feel better, and that's preventing him from aligning with this part. So for me, that comes before the relationship. These parts need to collaborate and come together so the relationship can go ahead and be one the same. And at that rate, I'm nominalizing it and making it a fixed process.
So I see it. Yeah.
I can ultimately say it's a process of them relating, and it's this whole thing where they can come together and relate together better.
I see it more as, I think it's logical levels, and I know we're way over time, but I think it's logical levels, Sean, where the pyramid, right, and your self identity is at the top,
Yeah.
and then the other things. So I see, an identity of, I'm a married man, or we're a married couple, right, and we're supposedly going to be together forever. And then there are other things down here, lower, that don't fit with this and don't support it. In fact, are working to destroy it. So we've got to change these different things down here to keep this intact.
Essentially what you're doing there is just putting a relationship into a Dilts model, logical levels there, which I've never seen that done, but from what you say there, it sounds like it could happen.
I'm a creative thinker.
Yeah, I don't know. But what I would ask first is, what is more important to this guy? What do you think drives him more, his well-being or the relationship's well-being?
And I don't want to, I think that's exactly the right question, and I certainly can't mind read, but based on him bringing up difficult circumstances and getting attacked and then saying, I'll bring it up again, I think that his higher purpose is the relationship in the long term. Seems fair to guess.
I would say that the relationship fits into his own highest intent of his well-being. He's in the relationship so that he can live better. He's not living so he can make a relationship better.
So he can live better.
So put it in this frame of context. The relationship exists. He created the relationship so he could live better, be happier.
I think you're a little too transactional about that, because we don't know.
And let's cross map it. Okay. So then if we replace those, he exists so he can be in a relationship.
I would say, or let me rephrase it and say, I would say, if it were me, that I see my highest purpose as being in a permanent relationship.
So what purpose does the relationship serve?
It serves the purpose of me and my spouse both being the best we can at what we're supposed to be, and being able to be the best at all the related things, like raising a family, say.
What happens if you don't have the relationship?
Well, back to my definition, I'm not serving my highest purpose.
Yeah, you should probably die.
No, I should work towards serving my highest purpose.
So get a new relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that sense, you had the relationship first, it was your highest purpose, and it's taken away. Why are you still living? What's presupposed behind that is that you are living so you can have this highest intent of this relationship. So if you don't have this, you should die.
I'm living so that I'm not
Let's
sure that
replace the
logically follows.
Let's replace
I'm not
the
living
two.
so that I can, but the highest purpose of my living is to. I'm not sure that that's logically equivalent, Sean.
Replace the two. So let's say that now we have my life and the relationship. Okay, if I lose my life, I can't have the relationship, right?
Right. But that's not the same thing as saying the only reason I'm living or I'm living so that is to have that relationship.
And if I don't have that, what am I living for? If it's impossible to have that.
So let's say that I think my highest purpose in living is to be a race car driver.
Okay.
And I get in an accident and I lose a leg, or both legs. I can't be a race car driver anymore.
Mm-hmm. So let's say that, and there's two.
I have to come up with a new highest purpose or redefine my highest purpose. Maybe it's to be a race car driver coach or something, right?
And
or a team owner, or
let's refine that just a little bit, okay? So we got these two highest intents that we're looking at. And my question is his highest intent for his own benefit, for living better, being more prosperous, having more survival value? Or is it, for this instance, being a race car driver, okay? And so you say, okay, it's race car driver. His highest intent, his highest purpose is to be a race car driver. So if he can't do that anymore, he can't live out his highest purpose, then this other one doesn't matter, right? Because I have this highest purpose of being a race car driver. If I can't do that, what's the point of me living? And if you swap the two, you say, okay, my highest intent is to live better, and I do that by being a race car driver. If I lose being a race car driver, I can still live better, and I can find other ways to do that.
Okay, yes, but I'm starting to lose where we were in the discussion.
Yeah, no worries. Does that make sense? You guys, what do you guys take on that? I know we're gonna wrap up here soon. I'm sorry for keeping you guys so late.
No, it makes sense to me, Sean,
Which does?
that my highest intent is to be prosperous, healthy, happy. And one of the ways I do that is by being in a relationship, or being a race car driver, or being a dog walker, or whatever it may be. But if I can't be a dog walker, I can find other ways to be the happy, healthy person who's living to my highest purpose.
And
it's like you said, I would redefine my highest purpose.
And if you see it in the reverse, where you live so that you can be a race car driver, if those are different, I am a race car driver and that's why I live, then if you don't have this, then there's no purpose to live anymore.
Right.
Just
okay,
with that specific.
I think I'm starting to see what you're saying. I probably need to go back and look at that Diltz model and just kind of think about all that. But so
Valerie, that's it for you.
But I think my brain is fading here. I'm starting to lose.
I know, it's late there.
I think I may have got a little lost, but I think highest value is to live well. I think I'm agreeing with you and Barb. I think you were framing it. I was internally nodding my head with that as well. And for me, the way that I'm making sense of it is structure versus content. Living well is structure. What I do with living well is just all content. And that allows me to pivot, to go from a race car driver to a race car driver coach to a published author about race car driver when the coaching thing gets old. And as long as I'm surviving and thriving, then my varied interests are no longer a problem, or my evolution as a person. And I've been doing a lot of stuff on the side with structure and content with my team and stuff. So that's probably why I'm processing it through that lens. But that's how I make sense of it.
That makes perfect sense to me, Valerie.
Ask a child what they want to be when they grow up, and very few of them anymore just say happy.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
Versus a fireman. Have fun with that kid, right?
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and wrap it up for us. He kind of just finishes the article out saying that you need toolboxes to better communicate. I'm all for that. I really do think that there's a different solution for this one that should be proposed, whether it's not using the psychological terms here. I believe that first, one, you got to solve your own problems, figure out where the criticism comes from in you, And then two, if I'm suggesting to this guy a better outcome to go, I'm doing it in more of a model of acceptance and love rather than this. Because this woman's hurt, she needs to feel some kind of acceptance, some kind of understanding, and then she needs to understand that she's not going to be hurt in the future. In my opinion, this best gets done by not apologizing. It could be just, saying sorry real quick. But I mean, if you have a big, long, drawn out apology, I'm going to be different, things are committed, it is not, it's going to do you more harm than good. I think it's better, I'm sorry, fix it, be done with it, if that's the case. Yeah, I know I didn't know that it would be actually this long of a training, so I do apologize for that, guys.